Thank you, Principal. Good morning. I was reflecting a little bit in my talk earlier this week, and I was thinking back to a conversation I'd had with some of my students. And they were absolutely amazed when they heard that when I was a student, I didn't have all this. I didn't have PowerPoint, I didn't have internet access, I didn't have email addresses. Our lecturers would stand at the front and write on blackboards with chalk, unless you had a really technically experienced lecturer who would write on acetates and put them on overhead projectors and put them away just before you could write everything down. I'm seeing a few nods. You're either students when I was or you were those lecturers. But the point that I'm trying to make is I didn't graduate that long ago. And universities have changed, and learning and teaching in particular has changed a big amount in that short period of time. So in the context of today's talk, we use assessments to ask, are our students making the grade? But we as academics really need to ask, are we making the grade? As universities change, the world around us change, are we continuing to make the grade? And that's really just what I'd like to share with you today. We in the Institute of Sport and Exercise are using some assessment tools that we think are developing industry relevant skills for our students and for their employers. But the caveat I'd kind of like to put in my talk is I'm not an expert in assessment and feedback. It's not my area of expertise, as Principal quite rightly pointed out. But the reason that I am here is because some of my students did nominate me for a Student-Led Teaching Award last year. And I was very honoured to be nominated, to be shortlisted and go on to win that category for Best Feedback and Assessment. So for those of you who don't know what these teaching awards are, they're run by our Student Association, and they give the opportunity for our students to nominate academics that they feel are exhibiting best practice in their teaching. So it might be there's an inspirational teacher, it might be there's an innovative teacher, it might be there's just a really supportive teacher. And that's a really important voice for our students. And we should listen to that, because they're telling us, what do they like? What do they want to see more of? And the great thing is, you can see there's over 100 academics up there nominated. So we're doing some things really well, which is great. So my field of interest is sport and exercise science. I'm employed in the Institute of Sport and Exercise, and I have a dual role there. I am a practitioner and I am an academic. So I've been teaching for about 15 years now, and most of my teaching outlet has been in a degree that we run in partnership with the School of Life Sciences called Sports Biomedicine. And our contribution to that degree programme is very applied. So we need our students to have a really strong grounding in biomedical sciences, particularly physiology, and then apply that. They need to apply that knowledge to enhance athletic performance. They need to apply that knowledge to work with coaches, athletes, parents, to educate them on those current research topics, particularly ones that are changing, like anti-doping advice. On the flip side of that, we know that physical inactivity is costing the NHS about £94 million each year in Scotland alone. So we need our students to be able to apply that knowledge to improve physical activity levels across all stages and ages of life. And we need our students to be able to apply that knowledge to use exercise to reduce the risk factors that are associated with many of our major illnesses and diseases, like diabetes, cancer, stroke, heart disease, obesity. So if we want our students to seek out research knowledge, critique that research knowledge, consolidate that learning, and then apply that knowledge, we need to assess them in ways that are relevant to that. Because whether we like it or not, that's the reality. Most of our students, most of the time, will study what you're going to assess them on. So if we want to improve student learning, we've got to look at the assessment tools and make sure they're relevant. They've got to be relevant for us as a university. They need to be relevant for certification purposes and for quality assurance purposes. But they need to be relevant for the student. We need to engage them in their learning. We need to enhance their learning experience. We need to develop them as lifelong learners beyond the time that they're actually with us. And we need to make it, we'll go back one. We need to make it relevant for the employer too. We need to develop graduates with industry relevant skills. We're very fortunate the graduate market is picking up again, but the reality is about 46% of graduates still end up in non-graduate jobs within the 5 years after they graduate. In my field alone, there's about 10,000 graduates in sport and exercise science field every year. It's not 10,000 new jobs every year. So what can we do to make them more employable, to make them more competitive in that employment market? And I believe assessment tools is one of those things. So I thought I'd share with you an example of one of the assessments that we've been using. We have a level 4 honours research module. So we look at current topics within our field. So it might be things like high intensity interval training, recovery methods, sport supplements. One of the topics we look at is strength training in youths. So it's received a bit of growing interest recently because with the investment that's been made in performance sport, there's more long-term athlete development programs. So we're starting to see younger and younger athletes being involved in more structured training programs. And the question comes up, is it safe for children to do strength training? Is there an injury risk? Is there a developmental risk? Why do gyms only let 16-year-olds and above in? There's a reason for that. On the flip side of that, as we start to do more physical activity, we're asking the questions of, should that just be aerobic activity, or is there a strength and resistance element to that as well? And it's something that people tend to have an opinion on. But I don't want my students to have an opinion. I want them to look at the evidence and the research and to be able to argue the facts on either side of the coin. So it's a publicly controversial topic. And on that note, I'd be curious to know what you think. So if your 10-year-old daughter, play along with me if you've not got one, if your 10-year-old daughter said to you, I want to do strength training, would you say, yep, let's do it, let's find out how we can do it, where we can go? Would you say, no, don't need to do it, there's a bit of uncertainty around it, I think we'll delay it for a bit longer, you've got plenty of other things to do? Would you say, I actually don't know? Who's going to vote yes? Let's do it, strength training. Ooh. Shyly we're putting our hands up. 5%, I'm guessing? Who would say no? Okay, 5 to 10%? Who would say I don't know? Okay, and a few abstainers in one stall as well. But that's the point. Okay, it's something that's a very applied topic that really there's a shared opinion on. For your own interest, these are the physical activity guidelines in the UK at the moment. We tend to know this bit. We tend to know that kids should be active, aerobically active for about 60 minutes every day. We don't tend to know this bit. The activities that strengthen muscle and bone should be incorporated at least 3 times a week. What do we do in the assessment then? First thing is, I don't teach them, not at this level. What I do is I direct them. I direct them to the research that I'd like them to read. And as they're reading that, I direct them with questions that I'd like them to think about. So I'd like them to think about the efficacy of strength training. Can kids actually get stronger beyond normal maturation rates? What are the benefits if they can get stronger? What are the risks? Are there any? What are the sort of program guidelines that we'd like them to follow if we are going to implement strength training? And what are the position statements? What are the experts actually saying from the professional governing bodies? Once they've done that, they come back into class and they have a discussion with their peers. So they start to think about their learning as they're telling somebody else about what they've learned. And at that point, I kind of work amongst them and say, well, have you thought about this? Have you critiqued this methodology? What about other reading you might need to do around this? Then the assessment itself is they have to develop a campaign to educate parents in strength training for youths. It's a very applied application of the knowledge that they've just learned. And there's 2 elements to that assessment. They have to do a brief group presentation informing parents about the topic and about their campaign. And then they have to complete an individual element where they've done a little bit more reading around the subject and they come with a piece of material that supports their campaign. And they can choose what that piece of material is. And they've been very creative in approaching that. But the key thing is it's all evidence and research-based, whatever medium that they decide to use. So what does it do? Well, it develops and it allows me to assess their research knowledge, which typically we would have probably done through an essay in the past. But using this sort of tool, it's applying that research knowledge, which is so important in terms of making them industry relevant. But it does more than that, this kind of assessment. It allows us to develop all these other graduate skills that we're looking for, either in my field or in any other graduate role that they choose to go into. So we've got communication skills, team working skills, critical thinking, problem solving, organisation, planning skills. You can see that the list is potentially endless. What's key to this, though, is feedback throughout that process. And if I use an analogy from my own field of sport, if an archer is firing a target, they're looking for feedback to make the adjustments before the next shot to hopefully improve on it. If we put them in a dark room or we blindfold them and they don't get feedback, they're going to keep missing that target. And it's exactly the same with our students. If we don't give them appropriate feedback that allows them to learn for it and feed it forward to the next part of their assessment, they're going to keep missing the target. So each stage of that process, we give them feedback. We give them feedback walking amongst them. We give them feedback verbally and immediately. We give them feedback written, emailed to them. And we offer opportunities to have feedback tutorial or for us to meet one-to-one to actually discuss the feedback so they understand it as well. So what do the students give us? This is a very small selection of the sort of creative things that they've submitted to support their campaign. And I'll show you a couple of examples of this if I can. So don't worry about the detail, because I know you won't be able to see it, but more of the impression of what it is that they've actually managed to produce. So this one's a parent information booklet. You can see already it looks professional. It's kind of aligned to their campaign. They've got a campaign name, they've got a mission. But then we start to get into the detail of the evidence. So they put strength training within the context of physical activity and while it's relevant, with research evidence supporting that. They look at the benefits of strength training for performance and for health, and they look at the safety of strength training. So really applied knowledge, which is great to see. They've got position standpoints, they've got guidelines, recommendations, and then they've got some nice kind of campaign type thing that we just added onto the frills. They have the references. If we look at a website, and this is where my students' expertise goes beyond mine, because I couldn't design a website like this. So again, nice looking homepage. We've got a scrolling banner for health, for performance, the link to Tayside, very nice. Active links. So pick myths. They've decided to question myths and then debunk them. We look at performance benefits, health benefits, very detailed, referenced, and somewhere we have a reference list. The final one I want to show you is one that I got a couple of years ago. I've only had it once. Very creative. Someone designed a phone app. So the only way that I found that I could probably show you this is to take some screenshots, but it is an active phone app where you can download it on your phone and press all the buttons. So this is a scrollable home menu. If we click on the benefits, we've got icons to show us all the different benefits. We click on, let's say, bone health, tells a little bit bone health. Click on evidence, it gives us the evidence of why children engaged in strength training should have good developments for their bone health. Down the bottom, down here, we've got other links. If we click on videos, they've included a resource library of videos, and they've also included a resource library of different sites that they can go to, Facebook, Twitter, and websites, which allows us to access things like position standpoints. And they've got the reference lists. Very creative, isn't it? What do the students say about this kind of assessment? I'll let you read some of the feedback they've given us. The students liked the assessment. How often do you hear them saying that? They liked it, but they found it industry relevant as well. They found it's preparing them for life outside university, which is exactly what we set out to do. And that feeds forward into more formal feedback. Over the last 4 years of running a module with this kind of assessment, our overall module satisfaction rate has been 98%. Last year, my overall module attendance, and that's compulsory and non-compulsory elements, they don't have to be there, 91%. The students want to be there because they enjoy this kind of learning. 100% of them said assessment and marking arrangements have been fair, and that I have to say is despite a range of grades. They weren't all awarded good grades, but they understand that it was transparent, it was clear, and why they got the grade that they got. Feedback was prompt, 100% overall module satisfaction. I think it goes a little bit further than that though, because I said that what we're aiming to do with this is prepare them for life outside university and to engage them and excite them in their learning. And there was an interesting poll undertaken by Gallup a couple of years ago in just under 30,000 graduates. And they found that the odds of being engaged at work were 2.6 times higher if university prepared them for life outside of university, and 2 times higher if they had at least one lecturer who made them excited about their learning. And that goes forward to odds of thriving in all areas of well-being. So that's financial, physical, social, community, similar result there, 2.4 times higher and 1.5 times higher. That's a great story. So, to conclude, are we making the grade? I think we are, but I don't think we can get complacent about it. I think we need to constantly review whether we are making the grade, because university and the world around us is constantly evolving and we need to rise to that challenge. This is quite a relevant quote. As lecturers, we know that assessments are time-consuming, they take effort. But I think what I'm arguing is if we put the right effort in and put the time in appropriately, then it will be profitable for us. It will be profitable for us at university, it will be profitable for the students, it will be profitable for the employers. And that's ultimately what we're wanting to do. I'd like to really thank you for listening, and very briefly, a quick thank you to colleagues who have helped me with my teaching and helped with preparing me for today as well. Thank you very much.